My name is Patricia Weerakoon, and I would like to speak to you about sex, gender, and identity. Specifically, how do we as Christians speak with grace into a gender-confused, gender-fluid culture? There was a time, about a decade ago, when boys were boys and girls were girls. A pregnancy ultrasound would tell us whether a mother was carrying a girl or a boy, and everyone took that for granted. That was a time when asking someone define what a woman is would be like, what are you talking about? And little boys being in little girls' change rooms or bathrooms would have had the mother calling for the police. And a little boy would never have played in a little girl's team. Things have changed. And this change has been driven by transgender ideology. What we are seeing now, what happens in the womb is irrelevant. The child knows who they are, and the child will tell us who they are. And politicians, doctors, health professionals are struggling to define what a woman is. And a man, by just self-declaring that he is a woman, has entry to any woman's space. And if a woman objects, she's a transphobe and a bigot. This is where we are. How did we get here? What do we do? And how do we as Christians understand this transgender tsunami that is sweeping our culture? As people of the word, we start with a biblical view. So let's go to the Bible first. The whole Bible gives us a clear picture of gender binary, created male and female, carried through the Word of God, through Song of Songs. Jesus, when he's asked about divorce, pulling into the Old Testament. 1 Corinthians 7, the beauty of the body and the marriage of man and woman and the marriage of Christ and his bride. The beauty of binary sex, tragically fractured as we see in Genesis 3 and beyond, where we see our emotions and desires are deceptive and twisted, as in Jeremiah. And in Matthew, when Jesus speaks about our desires being our heart being deceptive, and we see our behavior and our very biology is twisted and wrong. And this is where we are now. So what do we see? Let's get a little quick picture of where we are. These are the terms of transgender ideology. The lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, questioning queer, intersex, asexual, eunuch, plus, transgender. You know, the word transgender is an umbrella term. It basically is a term that says anyone who is uncomfortable with their biological sex can fit under this broad umbrella. You see here that we have 4 colors. Why 4 colors? It's to show you how confusing this transgender umbrella and how big the umbrella is. The green terms there, they're about behavior. The brown ones are about who you're attracted to. We call them sexual orientation. The one blue term is to do with biology. And all the rest has to do with this ephemeral whatever of gender identity. Now, everyone under this broad umbrella are said to be the victims. They are on a minority victim culture. And for young people, it's cool to be that. Who's outside the umbrella? Let's look outside the umbrella. And outside the umbrella are these few people, those who the word cisgender says are actually comfortable with their biological sex. So they're male or female, and they're comfortable, and they're heterosexual, attracted to the other sex. And as a derogatory term, they're cishet. Now, these are the oppressors. Who wants to belong to the oppressors? It's boring to belong to the oppressors. This is the neo-vocabulary of our transgender ideology culture. Let me introduce you to the gender tree. We look at sex and gender in 4 categories, and I will tease out each of these for you. There's the biological sex, which quite rightly is the root system and the trunk that holds us up. And then there is sexual orientation, gendered behavior, and this new ephemeral gender identity. Let's tease these out one by one. Biological sex is determined at conception, observed visually while in the womb, and only confirmed when the baby is born. Genesis 1 and 2 we just looked at. Psalm 139, when King David says, "You, God, knit me in my mother's womb." And then what happens? The baby is born. And after birth, kind of not much happens. The baby just grows. But then puberty hits. And at puberty, under sex hormones, there's secondary sexual characteristics which vary from individual to individual. Now, just because there's variation at puberty doesn't mean that the category of sex has some kind of variation. It's individual variation of normal puberty. Now, most people, the majority, this is happening beautifully in the womb and at puberty. However, in a rare instance, less than 0.02%, this clear development in the womb does not take place. And we have what we call genitals that aren't clearly male or female, ambiguous genitalia. And we see that this is called a disorder of sex development. The I in the LGBTQIA. Now, that intersex word is a really uncomfortable word to use. It's a word that is really we need to use with care, because you just listen to it. It says intersex. It gives you the impression there's a male and female and then something in between, an inter. Or it tells you there's male and female and some variation in between. Now, that is wrong. There's male and female and disorders. Biological sex is not a spectrum. There is no third sex. You are born in your body. Every cell of your body has a sex. You live in your body, you reach puberty, and you die in that body you are born in, male or female. Gendered behavior. We use our body to do things in gendered ways. Masculine, feminine. Now, this is biological to an extent, but largely affected by culture and influenced by culture. Now, this is a very large research that was done. Fascinating results. For over 30%, these masculine, feminine characteristics overlap. Are you immediately thinking, stereotypes? No. But even more interesting, at the ends of the curve, there will be, at the tail end, some boys who are more feminine in behavior and preferences than the majority of the girls, and some girls who are more masculine than the majority of the boys. What does this tell us? It tells us that an effeminate boy is still a boy. A butch, masculine-like girl is still a girl. Behavior does not change our sex or our identity. We as Christians need to give our children biblical role models for gender non-stereotypical behavior. Think Deborah, Jael. Think King David, who wrote poetry and played the harp. Give our children this ability to be who they are. Sexual orientation. In every culture studied, about 2 to 4% would be non-heterosexual. Gay, les, bisexual, fluid, asexual, not interested in any sexual, polyamorous, amorous, love of many people, pansexual, which is a new word, which really relates to attraction to all genders. Now, I want to leave you with one important thought here, and that is that sexual orientation is an attraction. It's a desire for someone, same sex, both sex, or the other sex. What you do with this sexual intimacy and sexual identity labeling is always a choice. And we need to teach our children this. It is very, very important because we live in a world that says if you desire it, then you must have it, and that's the only way to be happy. Now, 3 categories we have talked about: biological sex, behavior, and orientation. All 3 can be studied. They can be objectively analyzed either by biological chromosomal studies in biology or by laboratory studies or social studies, and you can assess them. They are objective. But we have 1 category left: gender identity. This is a relatively new category. It is one that says you listen to your voice of your inner feeling, and that is what tells you who you are. Of course, it's private because only you know it. And because only you know it, it is subjective. You can't study it. Nobody can look at a brain and say you have got a transgender brain. There is no such thing as a transgender brain. There is no such thing as a boy brain in a girl body. But if this constitutes your authentic self, it must be true, and therefore it cannot be questioned. And if you can't question it, it is immutable to you. But hey, it's a feeling, and feelings change, and therefore it must also be changeable. But I declare it to the world that this is what I am. I am non-binary, NB, or I'm polygender, or omnigender, or bigender, or demigender, and you have to affirm it, or not just even affirm it, you have to celebrate it. If you don't do it, then you are a bigot and a transphobe. This is the world we live in. Keep in mind that no one can ever actually change sex. I've said it already. You are born the sex you are, you live that way, reach puberty, and you die in your body. You are your body. Now, to say that you can change sex is a fantasy. You cannot do it. All you can do is cosmetic changes to the body. No one ever changed sex, and you cannot be born without a sex. So where are we now? We are in a place where we have a change in the demographics of people presenting with problems with their body. Many, many years ago, in 1980, I worked in Hawaii with a Professor Diamond, and I was helping him run, at that time, we called them transsexual clinics. There were just a few adult men Statistics say about 10 per 100,000. But you know what? They would say, I am a man, but I want to live and look like a woman. This is what we were seeing. We didn't see children. Even when children were seen, they were watched and did what was called watch and wait. In this graph, we see the recent development of transgender. What we call the transgender revolution. Just look at that for a moment. Over the last 14 years or so, we have seen a massive increase from adult men, a few adult men, to a massive increase of teenagers and children being referred for what we call gender dysphoria. This is, I am trans, but I am also distressed by it. And I want you to do something. Look at that green graph. Large number of teen girls. But let's not forget the boys. They may be smaller in number, but there's boys also. The increase. What drove this? What do we do about it? This is what we want to understand. It's a combination of many things. And we just need to trace it and understand it so that we, as the people of God, can help people deal with the distress that goes with it. So let's have a look at what could have and may have contributed to this tsunami. There are parallel tracks, I think. One of them is the sexual revolution. Each one of these is a lecture in itself. But I'm going to just spend a few minutes for you on each. The sexual revolution. We baby boomers started it with contraception. And now we went from there to the hookup culture, to the no-fault divorce, to same-sex marriage. What have we left? Change your body to suit your desires. And parallel to that, the rise of desire-driven, expressive individualism. An individualism that went from a culture where there was an outer authority, family, culture, God, who had the right to tell you how to live your life, to a culture that says, I make my decisions. I am my God, and I will decide what I desire, and my desires must be met. And we have a fragile generation growing up that say, I have a right to have my desires met. And there is what I find: satisfaction, happiness. Couch this all in social media, the rise of the I-gen. And we have the creation of the trans child, an impossible entity where we are told that children know that they are in the wrong body. And a man can just self-ID as a woman, known as a trans woman, and he must be recognized as a woman. This is where we are. And so we end up with the transgender tree. The aim of transgender activists and ideologues and allies is to create a new normal, a new understanding of ourselves, each other, and the world, cut off from biology and giving ultimate authority to this self-declared gender identity. All other aspects of life reinterpreted through the lens of self-declared identity. Anything other than that, anything other than complete acceptance and affirmation of this would be considered transphobic, bigoted, and if you try to change anything, conversion therapy. In this trans world, sex, we are told, is assigned at birth. We get assigned female and assigned male. Listen to that word, assigned, not determined in the womb, but assigned, as if the doctor, the parents made some arbitrary decision as to who you are. Sexual orientation, we are told, has to be to the gender. So a lesbian has to be attracted and have sex with a man who says he is a woman and is a lesbian, just self-declared, even if he has not had any surgery and is a biological man with male genitals. And we are told that behavior truly indicates identity. There comes the trans child. So, a little girl who doesn't like playing pink and Barbie dolls, but likes rough and tumble, is a boy. A little boy who doesn't like, or a teen who doesn't like Fortnite and whatever video games or playing rough and tumble, but likes pink and sparkles and Barbie dolls, is a girl. Behavior indicates identity. There is the formation of the young trans child. And out of that come all the other complications of people choosing a preferred pronoun, which can really be anything now. You can choose a they, them, or a him, her, or a sie, zer, or even a kitten self. You can even choose a kin gender. In other words, some non-human. You can be your kitten self, and the latest is even be a weather pattern. Your name chosen lovingly by your parents becomes a dead name, and anyone who doesn't go along with this is hating you, and hate speech and biology has now become bigotry. How do we speak grace and truth into this confusion? Couple of things to start off with. Only a proportion of those who claim to be transgender are actually distressed and want to do something about it. So the distress is real, but it's only the tiny bit of the iceberg that is above the water. We now know that there is a whole lot of psychological, social, biological factors that underlie the trans distress. There are many pathways in and out of these feelings of distress, especially for teenagers, especially for teen girls who see trans as something wonderful. You know, like, I can change my body. I can have a new body and be a new person. It's very seductive thinking. This is what we now speak into. It's not, are people distressed? We accept that. But it is, how do we understand it and how do we work with people who are distressed? Let me spend a few minutes with what we call trans adults. Usually we see them, adult men, married, often after having children, and they would say, I am a woman. They want to leave the wife, or they tell the wife, if you love me, you will continue living with me as a woman. Many theories, is it hidden homosexual feelings that these men have hidden away, and now they feel, I feel homosexual feelings, maybe I am a woman and I'm actually straight. Is it a condition called autogynephilia, which is a man who is sexually attracted to the fantasy of himself as a woman? Or is it any other psychological, neurodevelopmental, any neurodivergent condition? If we see someone in this stage of life, we need to help them understand that there is a distress, but there is a lot that lies under it. Let's help people explore and understand what lies under it. Even more important, help them understand the effect on people around them. Man becomes what he sees as a woman. He can never become a woman. What does that do to his spouse? She become a lesbian? Or, as we see now, is she a trans widow? What about the children? There are people other than you who are involved in this, my dear brother. Help people understand this. And if we are Christians, we help people live well with distress of whatever kind while we await final healing and peace in Jesus. What about teens? This is a very new and still studied area where young people, often with even no gender non-conforming behavior, all of a sudden come out and say, I am the other, usually girls. Now the theory is that they always were here, and all of a sudden, because it is so accepted, they're all coming out. But the research underlying this says the data, the increase of girls who are coming out this way and boys is beyond that. That fits into just acceptance theory. So what is happening? We think there's a combination. One is a development of adolescent identity. Adolescence is a time for searching for identity. And here is transgender identity. It's glorious. It's on the internet. We'll be your glitter family. You don't like your body? Well, you are the other. We are there, say the influencers. It's called social contagion. There have been many social contagions that have gone before. Bulimia, anorexia, a whole lot of other things have been traced to the internet, even tics or the Tourette syndrome recently. Friend groups who have immersed themselves in social media, often coming out together as trans. Other factors, pornography, porn, which portrays men as these toxic users of women. A gentle boy may not want to be that. Portrays girls as porn stars to be used by men. Some girls would flee from this image of womanhood. Video games, the nerdy boy who's not popular, immersed in video games on avatars that are female, begins to feel, I am a female. And an increasing recognition of comorbidities, a direct correlation with autism spectrum, eating disorders, depression. Teenagers caught up and believing that they can have a better life by going down trans pathway. It is the solution for everything in life. I will be happy if I do this. This is what we are seeing. Similarly, in children, there is no trans child. I repeat, there is no trans child. There are children who have autism, neurodivergent, a relationship with adverse childhood experiences, trauma, abuse, children in care. Very importantly, the gender non-conforming kid I talked about. I was one. Kids struggling with same-sex attraction, entering puberty, who think maybe I am the other and heterosexual. And as I mentioned, just that adolescent approaching puberty, discomfort with the body. So here are these children and teens and adults. What's the current treatment? In children, and I'm going to concentrate on children here. In adults, it's moving them into hormones and surgery. But in children, it's about gender affirmation. We need to stop and think, what are we affirming here? We are affirming the feelings to keep with what they want, affirmation at any age, against the reality of the body. So you're not affirming the real, you are affirming a fantasy. Social transitioning is at any age, and parents start kids on this at 3 and 4 years old, changing the name, the pronouns, the dress, the appearance, and the child then joining the other sex. This is social transitioning. When they start puberty, they are put on what are called puberty blockers. These are drugs that act on the brain and block the beautiful hormonal cascade of God-given puberty. Can be done as early as 9 and 10 years. Children, what decisions can they make? Children taking drugs that cause infertility, sexual dysfunction, whole lot of other brain development, bone mineral density changes. A 10-year-old asked questions about would they want to have a baby, like, hello, 10-year-old. By the time they're 16, they can be given cross-sex hormones, testosterone to girls, estrogen, progesterone to boys. By the time they're 18, they can have the surgery. And anything else in many countries is considered conversion therapy. This is where we are. But the good news, this is now being challenged. Some of us have been saying it for a long time. But just a couple of weeks ago, we had a very large, something like 388-page review, 4 years in making in UK, the Cass review, clearly saying the management now considered gender affirmation therapy has very poor evidence base and giving all the reasons, the dangers of the drugs, that left alone, a large number of children will desist. In other words, they will accept their biology at puberty. Hello, that's called growing up. Puberty is the best solution for childhood gender dysphoria. But if started on the affirmation pathway, almost all children will persist to medicalization and surgery. And the side effects of puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones are now being increasingly recognized, and surgery. And even more interesting, the what we call detransitioners, an increasing number of especially women who have gone through the full process, never can go back, and now say, I regret it. I was a child. Why did you let me do this? A recent detransitioner Reddit subreddit has over 53,000 members. And there's an increasing number of lawsuits against doctors and people who encourage this. What then are we recommending? The general recommendation, as recommended in the Cass review and in a site called Therapy First, is psychosocial support. Help people explore and understand what lies behind the distress. And wherever possible, fit disordered feelings to body reality. Nobody, remember, ever changed sex. You cannot do it. This is so important for us to know, especially for children and teens. You know, we must prepare our children, teach truth from the time they are very young, inoculate against the myths. There is nothing called a trans child. Just doing gender affirmation does not reduce suicide risk. Just because you don't affirm someone, they do not run out and commit suicide. Yes, there is suicide, but it's no different from another cohort with the same mental health concerns. Protect your children from social media use. Know their friends. Go to the school. Find out what's being taught, what books are being read, who they're getting in to teach children. And plan to handle problems with love, patience, and grace. Be ready to talk to your children. What would I do or say if my child says they are trans, non-binary, whatever? Let's pull this together. When dealing with a transgender person who is in distress, let us be people of conviction on God's word, but deep compassion and ability to comfort. Let us offer care in a community, because the LGBT community are very good at providing care. Let's be aware of the underlying issues. Let's offer counseling that is not, affirming and not gender conversion, not conversion therapy. Through it all, keep a clarity on science and culture. And above all, point people to Christ and the hope in him. But what about when we are dealing with the activists and the ideologues? Don't be combative. Seek to speak truth, but do so with civility and courage. What we would try to do is to persuade them, necessarily to immediately accept that we are right, but at least to consider that they may be wrong. Ephesians 4. Don't be tossed around by culture and human cunning, but let's be people of God who speak the truth in love as we grow up in him and into him. That would be my hope and my prayer for us all. And just to help you, we do have some books. The Gender Revolution is a book that we released just last year, which basically covers everything we talked about. Teen Sex is for 15 plus. It talks about teenagers and it covers gender and pornography and brain development. Growing Up is a useful book because it's about puberty. You and Me is for primary schoolers, even preschoolers, really. The ones you want to just start talking about how good their bodies, beautiful picture book. And Birds and Bees by the Book is for primary schoolers, for you to take in them through all the different aspects of sex and gender. Talking Sex by the Book is a kind of how-to book for parents and carers. And since The Best Sex for Life is there, that's a book which basically is about for couples and to-be marrieds on the best sex for life. So we have covered today a whole gamut of sex, gender, and identity, and how we as Christians, with conviction on God's word, can still reach out with compassion in a community that offers a home for all broken people. Thank you for listening to me.